Dr. Halie Schoff, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here.
And Happy New Year, because we chatted and I was fortunate enough to be a guest on your podcast last year, which was, weeks ago now, but it seems like longer. So anyway, I hope you had a good, relaxing break.
Same to you. Yeah, that was, I think, beginning mid-December maybe, but your episode's going to be coming out in a few weeks. So if we record this like middle of January, it should be coming out by the end.
Sweet. So our respective listeners will get plenty of us over the next little while. Yes. And I hope they like it. So I have some kind of big topics that I really wanted to discuss with you. But first, I think I'd love for you to kind of just give our listeners just a little bit of info on your background and what you do, because I think it would be more valuable coming from you than if I just like read out your bio. So tell us about the work that you do.
Sure. So I have been really into health and fitness my whole life. I was an athlete all growing up. I was an athlete in college, really interested in how can I fuel my body for performance. And then kind of as I've gotten older, I had, my own health struggles, acne, digestive stuff, irregular periods, like all the stuff where I'm like, this doesn't seem normal. And I'm really not into the whole, let's just take a pill for every ill type thing that you have going on. So I really became interested in hormones, especially when I was in chiropractic school, really learning about like your metabolism, nutrient depletions. And I was like, I don't think I'm healing my hormones on being on birth control. Like, I think it's just masking my symptoms of, why I was getting acne. It's not helping that in the first place. So that really kind of led me down this whole rabbit hole of this whole natural healing, hormone balancing, trying to heal yourself from within. So that's obviously a huge reason why I do what I do now, because I'm so passionate about it. I learned so much through my own journey and I've done so much extending research into that. So, and I love bridging the gaps between, like, I was an athlete my whole life. I love fitness. I love being strong. I love training and working out like an athlete, but I also understand the natural side of things, whereas I don't feel those two worlds are necessarily always bridged. Like, people in the holistic world will be like, just do yoga, just do Pilates. Like, we got to take it easy. We can never stress our nervous system. We can never do anything like that. And I'm not saying that's everybody, but I feel like people get that gist a lot. And then the fitness world, it's, shitty supplement ingredients sometimes. Like, I mean, I've
have abs no matter what.
Yeah, have abs no matter what. Like, it's okay if you lose your period. Like, take all these things as long as you look jacked and shredded. Like, you're healthy. And I like taking, okay, we can be strong, we can be lean, we can look and feel good in our bodies, but also be taking care of our internal side. So I really love merging those two, because I don't think if you just have one or the other, I think if you have both, you are truly in a good place, in my personal opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I think, and one of the things we can get into more later, it's like you said, fitness and like health and wellness are not the same. They are not an overlapping Venn diagram. It would be great if they were, but that's not the case. And I think so much of it is, our tendency to be attracted to or move to like the extremes instead of finding this like middle ground where we can kind of be optimizing all of it. And at risk of going off on a tangent, but this is kind of just like, it's coming up to me right now because it was just happening recently and it's related on social media. Like a follower, internet friend of mine had forwarded me this post from like it was a male. I don't know if that matters, but like a woman sent it to me, but it was like a male fitness professional basically talking about how women having six packs, generally speaking, isn't healthy. And it isn't healthy for them to have six packs all the time, most of the time for most women. And this woman,
I saw that video.
So this woman forwarded it to me and she's like, what kind of bullshit is this guy talking about? That's nonsense. And she I think she wanted me to be like, yeah, like we can have six packs if we want to. And I was like, I'm sorry to tell you, like, he's not wrong. Like there is there's a wide range of healthy body fat percentages and different women. Some women are naturally lean and some women aren't, just like men, whatever. But the reality is, most women, it is not healthy or sustainable to have a full six pack all the time. Doesn't mean you can't get there temporarily. Some people never will. Some people can quite easily, whatever. But I think the other thing, again, is like the semantics that we want to go to the extremes, because that doesn't mean, okay, well, women have to be 35% body fat and you're never going to look lean and you can't be toned and
Right.
just forget about it. It's like, and people, I've had people say to me when I've said that, I've had people say, like, well, you have a six pack. And I'm like, first of all, I have had a visible six pack very temporarily with a lot of work, knowing it wasn't going to be permanent. And do I have a visible six pack right now? Absolutely not. I might have some muscle definition. You might see like a little line here.
Right.
You might see like a little something. That's
I
not a
think
six
people
pack.
get confused between those two. I think they get like, just because you can see your abs doesn't mean that's unhealthy for you. Like, I can see my abs right now, but like I don't have a six pack. Like, you can't see each individual muscle. And it's definitely a spectrum. And I feel like people get confused between, okay, if I can see any type of core definition, that's a six pack, or I just have to be fluffy all the time or not have, like, there's a way you can maybe find both, but you got to do it in a healthy way.
Yeah. And I do understand too that like sometimes people just don't like strangers, especially men, saying what women can't do or shouldn't do. So I get that, 100%. But like listening to what he's actually saying, like it's an appropriate and an accurate message. Anyway, back to our topic. So what's like a work day look like with you? Like, do you work one-on-one with individual clients? They come to you because they're having hormonal issues or specific health issues and they think you can help. Like, how does that work?
Yeah. So, I mean, my practice has definitely changed a lot in the last few years. So, at first, going to chiropractic school, I'm like, I'm going to open up brick and mortar. I'm going to see people in the office. And I got my master's in nutrition along. So I always knew I was going to incorporate some type of functional health within my practice, whatever I was doing. But then obviously COVID hit and the world kind of shut down. So that's kind of where my virtual practice really flourished. It gave me a lot of time to really dive into functional testing and all these different things that I do now. So in terms of like a typical day, I usually see patients in the office or remotely most days of the week. Some days are just dedicated to admin because, solopreneur here. We do all the things. I edit my like so many different things. But yeah, I love seeing people both in office and virtually. It's great. I can really extend my reach, I mean, nationally and internationally, which is so cool. But I podcast, I have a membership. So I like being able to kind of have tiers because it's really passionate. I'm really passionate about trying to make functional health accessible. And I know that functional tests aren't cheap. Usually working with a functional practitioner isn't cheap because honestly, we have the insurance game and insurance doesn't reimburse for what we do. And so we usually take cash and therefore it's more expensive. And so I like being able to have tiers of like, here's all the free information. Here's, an easy entry membership platform. But then, if we do want to work one-on-one, I try to have scalable options because I do understand that's a barrier. And honestly, it's been a lot of fun. I love what I do. My practice is always evolving and I'm learning new things. I'm learning new testing, learning new protocols to implement. So I really enjoy it.
Are folks working with you on like the chiropractic side and then also like hormonal testing? Like how does that work?
So I do see people like usually, I mean, I've had a lot of people who come see me for chiropractic and they're like, I actually want to dive deeper. So we do a little bit more like deeper intake of kind of those separate things, but usually it's a chiropractic appointment or it's a functional health type appointment where we're really diving into those different things. So I see both. Obviously chiro, I do just solely in the office because I know some of my colleagues are doing like rehab and all that kind of stuff virtually, which is cool, but I like being able to put my hands on somebody and like really see what's going on. In terms of the chiropractic side, the functional health side is like, that's intake. That's really thorough history. We're reading over any lab work. We're really taking like a deep nutritional intake. So those are separate, but both are done in office. And then the nutrition or the functional side is all done virtual as well. So I do both. And some people who see me for chiro end up doing one or the other. Or maybe someone sees me, we want to fix their hormones. And like, actually, like I have some soreness. I have some low back stuff. So, I mean, people definitely go back and forth between the two.
Mm-hmm. And I know obviously things are sort of different in the States and in Canada where I am, but would you find yourself working like alongside someone's physician or medical doctor? Are you allowed to, like, if we're talking about things like Dutch tests or like, I don't know, allergy tests or things like that, like, are you allowed to receive those and interpret those and go through those with an individual So like, how does that work with like what you're doing versus what like a typical medical doctor would do?
Yeah. So, I mean, I want to be as integrative as possible. Some providers are more open to it than others. Some people just want to be like on the conventional side, which is fine. But then, there's a lot of times where I'll tell somebody something like, hey, I'm not necessarily communicating with their doctor, but I'm kind of, hey, make sure you tell your doctor that we're doing this or run
Mhm.
this by them to see that this would be okay. I mean, again, and some of them are open to it and some of them are like, I just want to stick with what we're doing. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's totally up to the patient or client. Like it's their right to choose whatever they most feel aligned with. But in terms of
Mhm.
functional testing, I pretty much run it all: Dutch hormone testing, stool testing, minerals, like pretty much any of the functional tests. Blood work, I usually tell people if you can get them done from your primary provider, it works good that way because then they hopefully can get it covered under insurance. Because with me, it's more out of pocket, which is if people want to do it because they want it run, then they do it. But in that sense, yeah, we're working back and forth to see with what they can get run, what their doctor, what script they'll write. But yeah, I really do feel like integrative as we can be is really where I feel the health of our world honestly needs to be. I feel like
Mm.
there's a time and a place for conventional, but there's also a time and a place for more naturopathic functional round. So it really, I feel like, is best when both go
Mhm.
together.
Mhm.
Sometimes it jives more than others, but
Yeah.
yeah, all in all, being able to have that communication between both is important.
Mhm. Okay, so let's start talking about some hormone stuff. You
Okay.
mentioned birth control, and we can talk about that. But I gotta say, one of the main reasons I wanted to have you on is that one of the most common questions I get over and over again from podcast listeners, from folks who are interested in Rachel and our strength training program, muscle science program, any work that I do, question keeps coming up over and over again. And it's essentially, how do I optimize body composition, build muscle, gain strength, whatever, in parallel with my hormonal health as I enter into my 40s, menopause,
Mm-hmm.
etc. Now, neither of us, and this is a problem because Rachel too, none of us are at that stage in our life yet. So I sometimes feel like I do a ton of research. I feel like I have some information, whatever, but like I'm always like, these women are looking for help from a bunch of like 30 somethings who have not experienced it. And I can only speak in very general terms. But it's obviously an issue. It's a concern. It's women's hormonal profiles and their reactions to how they eat and sleep and work out are changing as they age and they don't know what the heck to do. So, do you have much experience in that area? Are you mostly working with like reproductive age 20s, 30s, or are you working with women as they get older? And like, can we dive into that?
Mm-hmm. To answer your question, I would say it's definitely a mix of both. I'd say I see a lot of post-birth control. I see a lot of wanting to improve fertility. I see a want to and improve hormones postpartum or, within their 30s. I see a lot of that. I'd probably say, I don't want to say the majority because I do see a lot of menopause too, but I would say if we had to say maybe 60 to 70% that, 40 to 30 to 40% of, the menopausal side. But I do see both. And it's, I'd say my biggest advice is wherever you are at now, the more that you can balance things, it's going to, so if you're in your 20s, 30s, the better that your hormones are now, you are going to be in such a better place where menopause doesn't have to be a drag because usually like everything that we do is going to be catching up to us. So you just destroy your body or you don't take care of your hormones or you're eating low fat, all these diet foods all throughout your 20s, 30s, it might not affect you, but it is going to affect you at some point in your life. So when it's not addressed and then those hormones tank and fluctuate, you're left to deal with it. Because it's the same thing with like having your period. Having your period every month honestly should not be a whole production. It's,
Mm-hmm.
you might feel a little bit more tired. You might not feel as energetic. You might maybe feel some things kind of going on, but like you shouldn't be bedridden with cramps.
Yeah.
That's not essentially normal. Like you should get it and be able to kind of function throughout your day and not dread it. Same
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing with menopause. Like it shouldn't be like this doomsday part of, our cycle or our life that we just dread and if we're dreading it, that's kind of a sign that like there's some imbalances we want to look at. And tying that back to your portion of, body comp with hormones, you can have both. There might be a time where like if you've been dieting your whole life or you've been constantly under eating, might need to refeed and reverse diet a little bit to like make your thyroid a little bit happier, get a regular functioning cycle. But once things are in tandem and really working together, you can totally have both. I see issues with weight being a sign of a bigger issue going on. Obviously, you can't be just eating as many calories in the world and eating 5,000 calories a day in junk food. Of course, that's, a problem. But if you're being like, I'm eating, my macros perfectly, I'm really prioritizing protein, like I'm working out, the scale's not moving, that's a good sign to me. Like there's a bigger imbalance that we need to look at. Is your body overstressed? What's your cortisol look like? Do you have any symptoms menstrually? What's going on? Because there's always a reason, and our body's just trying to tell us something, especially if we've kind of like checked off all the basic things. As long as those things can be addressed, there's no reason that says you can't have both. And like I said, it's not going to be, an overnight thing. I got a regular period. That means my hormones are balanced, and that means my weight should be exactly where I want it to be. I mean, it can totally be a fluctuating journey, but it is possible. I mean, I feel like I'm happy to say I'm at a point where I don't really have to worry about, my lifestyle doesn't really change. It's always a work in progress, right? It's not just like you get to this point and you throw everything away. Like I always see it as a journey. So I guess as I say, like, I don't have to necessarily work on or worry about, gaining and losing because I pretty much keep things consistent. But, you can be at a place where you're happy with what you look like. You can crush your workouts with prioritizing rest and recovery and keeping your hormones in mind, but you definitely can have both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You touched on a couple important things here. And one being, I guess, big advice to give women in their 20s and 30s is like, don't waste time restricting and starving yourself and chronic cardio and beating the shit out of your body just because maybe you can handle it now, or because your priorities are being lean and toned, because that is going to just compound when you get older. And when we all eventually smarten up and decide that like muscle and health is more important than being skinny, how many times I have heard people, professionals in the fitness industry, everybody say, I wish I had not spent so much time in my 20s, just eating salads and being hungry all the time. And I've heard people say like, I don't care if my cycle's messed up. I'm not trying to have a baby right now. It's like, first of all, that there's so many issues with that. And even if you never want to have a baby, you want a healthy cycle.
It's like a vital sign. It's like saying, I don't care if my blood pressure is continuously horrible, or I don't care if my,
exactly.
Like it literally is a vital sign. Like whether you want to have kids or not, your period is a crucial piece to your overall health.
Yes.
Crucial.
And, I've had lots of older clients, older meaning older than me, I guess. So I don't want to say older clients, but like, women in their 40s and 50s who they come to me and they say, I'm eating perfectly. I exercise all the time. I take all these supplements and I still have like this little bit of belly fat, or I can't build muscle. And it's almost always, and I don't monitor people's hormone levels. I don't, read Dutch tests or whatever, but it's always that they're too stressed out. And it's like,
I was just going to say it's their cortisol. Cause like I had this the other day, I read a Dutch test and it's like, she's like, I'm doing CrossFit about 5 to 6 days a week. And I looked at her calorie intake and I don't know, maybe she's at 1,500, maybe. And I'm like, you're overstressing yourself. You're going to hold weight in your midsection because that's where cortisol loves to go. You're postmenopausal. So your ovaries are not making estrogen and progesterone that is up to your adrenals. You're overstressing your adrenals. It's no wonder you're having hot flashes and you don't feel very good.
It's like I'm trying to completely sort of switch my approach with some of these clients now. And I mentioned this in a previous podcast where I'm essentially trying to like program de-stressing activities the way I would program strength training. Because if I tell most of these women, you need to incorporate relaxation into your life, they'll be like, no, because I don't want to do that. That doesn't seem active enough. It seems boring.
It's not sexy. It's not sexy. Like
HIIT is more fun. Make it sexy though, guys.
You can. But
if I'm like, okay, like Monday through Friday, 30 minutes, first thing in the morning, go do this. And the this is like sitting and quietly breathing and reading. But like if I like make it seem like it's an active thing they have to do, because that is true. Like it is part of your lifestyle, it's part of your self-care routine, it's part of your programming. It should be part of your strength training fitness program, just as working out and lifting weights and doing cardio or whatever it is you're doing. These downtime, like it's so crucial. And I don't know how else to, except for saying it over and over and over again and living it too. I don't know how else to get through to people. And like you'd think, I said even earlier, like, women in their 20s and 30s, like we need to smarten up and like learn from our mistakes. But these are women in their 40s and 50s who are still doing the same thing. They just cannot relax.
Break
They
the
cannot
cycle.
step back. And I don't know what we can do culturally as a group to really get it, to really, really get it. I don't know. I don't know how.
We need to make self-care sexy again, because like it's not just what you look like in the mirror in the gym. Like it is so much more. I was literally just talking about this the other day, and they know they know they shouldn't be doing it. I was talking such a high level. She's an entrepreneur, high achiever, like hormones tanked, cortisol high. I mean, I may be lucky if she's eating one whole food meal a day. And I was like, we gotta eat. And she's like, I know. She's like, I know I have to eat. But I'm like, now it's like, how can we get you to eat more? It's just, I mean, we are just such a cortisol driven society. We love cortisol. I mean, it's what makes us feel productive. It's what makes us like, we go, go, go. But like cortisol can only be there for so long before it tanks and you feel crappy and you're going to hold weight in your midsection and other parts of your body, because your body is like, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm holding on to it because I have no idea what's going on. And that people, once you kind of get people to realize that, I feel like that's like, okay, now how can you program it into your day, or how can you add just little things to just chill your nervous system out a little bit, because it's just as important to fat and body composition goals as cardio or weight training or protein intake. Like I see it as just as important, if not, depending on the situation, sometimes even more important. Yeah.
Yeah. Like if I could just get clients to be like, just do this for me for 3 months, like you're paying me as a coach or whatever, like just commit to it. Because again, and I say this over and over again, but like if you're paying me or you or anyone for their help and their expertise, chances are it's because whatever you're doing isn't working for you. And if I tell you, yeah, sure, just keep doing what you're doing, like just do the CrossFit and
that's
don't
a waste
eat
of
that
money.
much. What are you gaining from that? So like, even if it makes you uncomfortable, even if the idea of replacing 3 workouts with yoga or a hot bath or like whatever, like just do it for me for a few months. And then see, and maybe your body composition improves. Maybe you're sleeping better. Maybe your mood improves. Maybe your appetite goes up. Maybe your libido goes up. Maybe your life is like drastically improved. And then you believe it, and then you can do it. And then maybe there's a ripple effect where you tell your other stressed out friends to do it. And it's like, that's how it starts. But you got to like be able to take that step, like just jump off that cliff into the relaxing abyss and like see what happens. But man, it's hard. It's so hard.
You have to. I was just talking about this with a patient in the office this morning. She came and saw me postpartum and holding on to stuff. Postpartum, it's takes all your nutrients. It takes all your minerals. It is like a beautiful, but stressful process, as you know. And she came from this world, diet culture, macros, like the more that I work out and the more intensely I work out, the faster I'm going to lose this weight. I was like, I only want you doing 3 to 4 days a week max. And I don't want you doing intense Peloton rides, all of those, like mixing some strength training. She's like, so getting her to understand the less is more was definitely a flat for her. But a month later, she's like, I'm down so much inflammation. I've lost weight like effortlessly. I haven't changed anything. If anything, she was eating more nutrient dense foods, less inflammatory foods. I mean, and it's not rocket science. And I'm not saying she's 100% now, right? Like we're in this journey where, there's hormone fluctuation, she's ebbing and flowing, but like getting her to flip that switch and her trusting the process, she saw results. Not saying whoever's listening to this, you're going to see results in 4 weeks, just like, but you will feel and see your body change. Sometimes that stagnant weight that you don't see move, that could be inflammation. Yes. And when your body's inflamed, it's not like you need to pound it harder. Sometimes you got to take it down, Epsom salt bath, sweat, calm your nervous system down. Cause all of that cortisol is not
Hmm.
doing your metabolism any justice.
Can you talk a little bit about, because this inflammation piece is huge, because yes, I mean, again, there's a big difference between someone who is 30, 40, 50 plus pounds overweight and is looking for a movement and nutrition plan to lose excess body fat, and the, again, lean 50-year-old who does 6 CrossFit workouts a week and has like a little belly. Like that's probably inflammation for the most part, right? A
Mm-hmm.
lot of time, and a lot of times we're walking around inflamed. We don't realize it until we make changes that reduce the inflammation. And we're like, oh, whew, like I look better, I
Mm-hmm.
feel better, I'm not whatever. Um, how is the inflammation connected to like hormones, like cortisol, or like I
Mm-hmm.
want to talk about like the thyroid thing, like how cortisol and the thyroid are connected, because it's kind of confusing to me, even somebody who's been in this world and read about it and heard about it from so many different people. Like I don't know how all this stuff is connected. So can you kind of talk about that, the
Yeah.
inflammation piece as it relates to hormonal health?
Yeah. So I think of it as like a pyramid. So this might be oversimplified, but it makes sense. And it's physiologically accurate. So at the top of the pyramid, like your most important, the top dogs would be insulin, like your blood sugar, and cortisol. Your insulin and your blood sugar are controlling everything else down the pyramid. So insulin is controlling thyroid, insulin is controlling progesterone, estrogen, testosterone, it's controlling DHEA. Same thing with cortisol. When cortisol is imbalanced, we'll look at what it's controlling and impacting down the line. It's impacting your thyroid because a lot of times they're competing for very similar nutrients. High cortisol is very
Mm.
energy expensive in terms of B vitamins, magnesium, trace minerals. So getting those things in when you're more stressed is beneficial to help obviously replenish those things. But how many of us are incredibly deficient and living on chronic stress for years? We see a lot of mineral stuff affect. I mean, trace minerals are so good for your thyroid. And it makes sense because they're being depleted. So that's kind of how I think of that cascade. I'm like thinking of one of the graphics I've made in my head. But I think of that in like that connection. Whereas, the bigger hormones, insulin, blood sugar regulation, which I mean, you look at how that ties into inflammation. Have you ever eaten like a really high carbohydrate meal and without balance and without protein, and you just like you can't get your rings off and you're like, my face feels puffy? That's inflammation. I mean, that is like a very clear sign of that. And same thing with cortisol. Some people see cortisol differently. Some people feel it, in their face. They lose kind of like that. They just feel puffy. A lot of people feel it in like their lower abdomen. That's all inflammation. And that's because those hormones are just like causing your body to hold on to more water. Your body's in a stress state. It's not going to let go of things. And, it's obviously affecting everything else down the line. You can see inflammation with high testosterone. I see that a lot with like bodybuilders, blood sugar dysregulation. Again, because it's always tying back to a bigger picture. Like we can look at one of the minuscule hormones, like, not minuscule, they're still very important, but more of like the specific sex hormones, but they're always usually tied back to another kind of top dog. Estrogen, depending on, how you detoxify and metabolize it, that can be very inflammatory. Estrogen dominance, right? That's, the tender breasts and that really heavy water retention or bloating before your period. I mean, that's again due to your estrogen, which could be due to cortisol, could be due to blood sugar because we become a little bit more insulin resistant second half of the cycle. So if you're following along and you're like, I don't know what she's talking, she's just throwing out a lot of hormones. If we could just think of like the most important ones, insulin, cortisol, kind of driving the rest. We know our sex hormones, testosterone, estrogen,
Mhm.
progesterone. DHEA is kind of like a step above that. So it's kind of DHEA makes all your sex hormones. And then above that, I would say would probably be your thyroid, because your thyroid's pumping out a lot of those things. But you want everything to be balanced and focused, when we're kind of thinking of this whole cascade. Does that help?
Yes, I'm taking notes here. So, but basically, what I think is important to note, because you're talking about how high cortisol is very like expensive, right? So it uses up a lot of energy and a lot of nutrients, which is sort of, again, clarifying in my brain why a lot of women could be eating right. I'm using air quotes here for the people listening, eating right, doing the right things. And so they're like, but I'm eating all this good stuff. Why isn't it translating into better body composition, building muscle, feeling good. It's like maybe because your cortisol is so high that it's burning through all this stuff and you're still nutrient deficient, or you're still not getting, the vitamins and minerals that you need because you're so effing stressed out, so
Yeah.
that kind of, yeah.
And then you even get into the side tangent of, okay, well, if you're stressed, you're not digesting properly. Like we don't digest well in a stressed state. So you could be eating all this stuff, but if you're going, eating in the car, eating while you're on your computer, it's like, you're probably not even really absorbing the hopefully good stuff that you're trying to eat anyway. So, I mean, it's totally a double-edged sword, but yeah, I mean, cortisol is a very expensive, process.
This is kind of like a specific question, but because it's another one that I get a lot. And, you were talking before about how a lot of symptoms, like menstrual symptoms, are very common, but they're not normal. Like literally in our culture, it is accepted and joked about and tolerated that you should feel emotionally crazy, that you should be in a ton of pain, and that you just have to deal with it. And another sort of commonly accepted symptom of being a woman that I heard a lot was that oftentimes postpartum, when your period comes back, it will be worse, heavier, painful, terrible. And even with my limited knowledge, I'm thinking, well, maybe that's because you have a baby now and you're super stressed out and tired, and you're nutrient depleted because you're breastfeeding or whatever. And that certainly makes sense. And we can't be perfect at everything all the time. But you'd like to think that as part of your recovery process, and you're trying to eat really nutrient dense foods, and you're trying to rest, and you're trying to just get yourself sorted out again, that it's not a given that your period is going to suck after you've had a kid. But it seems anecdotally to me, just from talking to people, it seems like that's a very common thing. Again, I've been quite fortunate that I have not experienced that. And I credit that to not beating myself up and taking good care of myself and eating a lot of nutrient dense foods and high iron and magnesium and zinc and all that stuff, all that organ meats that I'm eating and stuff like that. My period's pretty much a non-event, as you mentioned, which is the ideal thing for it to be. But do you have any insight into that? Was what I'm saying probably accurate, that people are just like, you're starting kind of at a disadvantage postpartum, and so your period's going to be worse, and people just kind of deal with it, and they say that's the way it's got to be?
That's a good question. And I would agree that I would definitely agree with what you said, like really honoring like the stage of life that you're in and making sure you're taking time to rest and like getting as much rest, recovery, nutrients as you possibly can. I also feel like there's a huge factor to how they were before you got pregnant. And that's why I'm a huge fan of preconception. And I consider preconception 1 to 2 years before you even want to get pregnant. I think a lot of people don't take that very seriously. And I just don't think it's as widely talked about, but I think that it's really important that 1 to 2 years before you want to have a kid is where you should be getting your period to a point where it's not debilitating and your hormones are balanced, and you're making sure that if there's things you need to detoxify from, that's when you do it. Because there's so many people that come to me, they're like, I'm pregnant and how do I detox? I'm like, you don't when you're pregnant. Like that healing and whatever you need to get rid of, that needs to happen preconception. And that could be a whole nother thing, because there's actually, there's a study that came out, I can't remember when, but it found like over 300 different chemicals in the placenta. And I see a huge toxic burden be hugely related to period issues. And if you're carrying that on and unfortunately passing that to baby, that's still in your system postpartum and can definitely create some of those, liver burden things that are going to create estrogen dominance and some of those obviously unwanted symptoms. So I think if you want to really set yourself up for success postpartum, that's going to start years before you even want to conceive. I consider myself in definitely a preconception phase. I don't know when we're going to conceive, but when we do, we're going to be like primed and ready to go. Yeah. And, I'm not worrying about, oh shoot, I want to get pregnant next month. I'm going to just detox everything now. It's like, that's not enough time, like really giving yourself the adequate time to heal. And I get some stuff happens and, sometimes we just get pregnant and we weren't really planning on it, and that's okay. But if you're listening to this and you're like, I know I want to have kids in the future and I want to make sure I'm not only setting them up for success, but setting myself up for success postpartum into menopause, we're really long time planners here. But if you can really prioritize that, anything down the road is going to be much more streamlined and beneficial because you took the time previously to address it.
And I think looking at it like preconception health is just health. Like I think a lot of people think like, okay, it's this big thing. Like I got to like get on the prenatal vitamins and I got to do XYZ. And it's like, again, I'm not an expert. I had one kid. Okay. But I just talk about what my experience was because I was very well researched and I did a ton of work and I really, really tried to do this the best way that I could. However, my like preconception plan was non-existent because I lived my life in a way that was supporting my health as a conception age woman. So I didn't have to do a ton of stuff. I was eating, again, very nutrient dense food, organ meats that was basically a prenatal vitamin in itself. And, working out in a way that was conducive, like my hormonal health was good. Like you shouldn't have to live very differently to be healthy for conception. It should ideally be very in line with the way that you are hopefully trying to live already.
True.
Yeah.
I like that. It's not like it's this huge, big protocol and like extensive list. It's like, I'm literally living my life I'm trying to live as low tox as possible. We're looking, we've done a lot of work cleaning out our house over the last few years, really trying cause all of that stuff it's a journey. And I just consider that a part of my health insurance, my longevity, quality of life policy that I have for myself. It's like, yes, that's helping for preconception, but like, that's just also setting me up for being a better human and living longer, hopefully free of disease down the road. So I see those two definitely going together. If there's anything like extensive that needs to be done or like specific hormone balancing, again, that's something you want to address before hopefully you get pregnant. And if you don't, there's certain things that you can do that are pregnancy safe, but ideally, like you said, living as healthy of a life conducive to your hormones, your overall longevity prior is honestly the best way to set you up.
And it goes back to, I think, how historically we treat like women's health as an afterthought, everyone, like the medical system and women and everyone. You shouldn't like, in an ideal world, we shouldn't want to suddenly be healthy because we're carrying a child. We should want to be healthy because we deserve it and because it's important for us and our health and how good of a human we can be in the world because we're taking care of ourselves and healthy. I hate this narrative that it's this afterthought that like, well, if I have time, I'll go do some self-care or like, I got to take care of these people first or else they won't take care of themselves or like this weird martyr, women don't deserve it. It's an afterthought. I hate it. I hate it so much. And I don't think that should be a part of it anymore. And I use the story all the time. So I'm going to tell it really quickly because I know anyone who's listened to this podcast has heard it before. But when I was pregnant, I was listening to all these podcasts and nutrition podcasts. And, it was like these sort of plant-based nutritionists talking about the ideal nutrition for a pregnant woman. And they basically said like, if you're plant-based, unless you're really, really anti-meat, like if you just prefer to be plant-based, it's really a good idea to try to eat some animal protein when you're pregnant, because that's really going to support the health of the fetus and the growing baby and all this stuff. And I'm thinking like, okay, so whatever beliefs you have about eating only plants go out the window when you're building a new baby, because then it's important. But when you're supporting your own body's processes and health, like screw it, like just eat suboptimal stuff and kind of be unhealthy. Who cares? Because it's just you. But when it's a baby, go be healthy and do the right thing. Like I hate that concept. So I feel like if we can just all get over that together and just understand that we deserve health and we deserve to pay attention to how we feel. And it shouldn't be the 4th, 5th, 10th thing on your list. It should be the first thing because you have nothing without your health. And then you can, it's like the putting the air mask on you first before anybody else. Like just that should be the way we feel. And
I agree.
Yeah, I feel strongly about that. So I'm glad there are people like you who are helping women understand that,
I agree. Because if you say you're a caregiver or like in my mind, like I can't best like one, be a wife or any like a practitioner, if I'm not taken care of, because if I'm not coming to like a session with my best energy and my best health and my best focus, that's a waste of them trying to come and work with me. So I see it as not only a personal thing with my personal life, but also a professional thing. Like whatever you do, whether you own your own business or not, like if you aren't 100%, I mean, not saying we all need to be 100% all the time, but if we're not trying to get to 100%, you're doing yourself a disservice.
Yeah.
I think it's the most empowering thing in the world when you like, that's why my saying is like, be the alpha of your health. Because if you're not, like, what are you doing? Or if you're not trying to, at least, what are you doing? Because I just feel like there's no, like, nobody, I don't know, you're just so much more independent. You don't rely on anything because you know how to take care of yourself.
I like to also kind of talk about like, and again, I'm going to preface this because I always feel like people listening are going to be like, well, until you hit menopause yourself, like you can't really talk, lady. And like, I get it a little bit. But I think, again, from like the research and the work that I've done, we're all very bio individuals. Some people genetically, whatever, are going to be more predisposed to having a harder time, an easier time, whatever. Like, what was your mom's menopause like? Like, all, there's factors that go into it, perhaps a little bit outside of your control. But I think a lot more of it is in our control than we think.
So much more.
And I think that like having some perspective and how you think about aging is going to be almost as important as like the physiological reality of what's happening. So it's like this fine balance of accepting that we are getting older. We're fortunate enough to be getting older. And so we are, no matter how hard we try, we are not going to be the same at 50 as we were at 20. So accepting the reality without, again, going far over to the other side and being like, well, I just give up and just whatever's going to happen is going to happen. But I say perspective because I have clients coming to me who are, 50 and in great shape and crushing it. And then I have clients coming to me who, again, sort of no judgment, it's just a story, who are like, I'm finding it just so much harder to have energy and to build muscle now that I'm 29. And I'm like, guys, come on, guys, you're 29. Okay. You're very young. Like subjectively, you are a young person in the prime of your life. Like to complain about it's harder now because I'm what? You're not 16. Like no one's 16.
Right.
Okay. Like, and even me, I'm in my late 30s and maybe for an elite athlete, I'm no longer in the prime of my life, but I still recognize that I'm not the same as I was when I was 22, but I can still improve. I can still be stronger than I was. I could still look better than I did 10 years ago if I want to. I can improve my stress levels, my health, my sleep, all of those things. So it's all perspective, right? Because
I think it's all subjective. It's like it is what you want to feel. I mean, there's people who I feel like take better control of their health that are older in quotes than people who are 20 years younger than them. And absolutely. I mean, it's all subjective. It's all what you want to do and how you want to perceive it.
Mm-hmm. So in your experience with people that you're working for or working with, how common or how much information or how much are you talking about things like hormone replacement therapy for women? Because I know this is an increasingly bigger and more commonplace conversation for men, right? And I think it's becoming like quite normal and natural to discuss healthy, appropriate, like testosterone replacement for men as they enter their 40s and 50s or whatever. But what about with women? Like, women who are maybe past child conceiving age and they're trying to like optimize things. Like, is that a conversation you have? Like what's going on there?
We'll have like a conversation about it. I don't prescribe any bioidenticals or anything like that. I always try to say, if you need, and I have quite a few who are on it, because of symptom reasons. Like they just feel like, I'm thinking of one example where she went on like testosterone pellets because she just like needed that edge that she was losing. But I'm always making sure I'm telling her, okay, this is even more important that we support your adrenals because your adrenals are making your sex hormones right now. It's not as much, but it's really important that we are making sure that although you're on this, we're supporting the root cause. And say the caveat to that too is like, especially for men who go on something like TRT, like it's not the same, but it's similar to how birth control works, where it's a negative feedback loop where it's not, you aren't going to produce testosterone very well on your own if you choose to go that route. So I think of, people who are on it, and it's like, it kind of is almost something that if you want to maintain the benefits that it's giving you, the muscle mass, et cetera, it's almost kind of like you're buying into a long-term thing. So I make sure that like, it's not as much that way for like progesterone, estrogen, those types of things. I'm totally open to people using like progesterone creams, especially for some of those menopausal solutions. But I mean, a lot of times, again, like I think
It should
back,
be like a last ditch effort.
I see it as a last resort type thing, or like
Yeah.
if you need that symptom relief to have quality of life, but there's so many reasons that you're experiencing that I just want to make sure, like, my job's to help you address those. And if that's the path you want to go, I 100% support you. I mean, cause I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, I've worked with bodybuilders who, have done PEDs, and I'm like, hey, I support you. I'll do what I can that's in my lane. But at the end of the day, like, kind of here's the informed consent around all that,
And you are taking risks. Like, I think there is a difference between, again, like a 45-year-old man who's experiencing very natural declines in testosterone, who wants to kind of like boost it up a little bit through the help of a doctor, versus a 21-year-old guy who wants to be as big as he possibly can and is taking a bunch of HGH or whatever. It's like, it's probably going to be a problem for you later on down the road. It's not as big of an issue, I suppose, with women. Although, again, as you know, in the bodybuilding world, I mean, it is just chock full of PEDs. Like, people don't think that
it's
a 115-pound bikini competitor is taking gear, and like they're taking a lot of it,
they are
probably. So
they are. Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah. It's
crazy too, because like, I will be like, you don't have any of like, you don't have acne, you don't have hair growth. Like, wow. Like they've gotten to a point where like, there's so many ways that you can mix and match these. PEDs is a whole separate subject. But I mean, especially kind of going back to the informed consent, like if someone's going to prescribe bioidenticals, like especially for a 45-year-old guy, make sure, what are your vitamin D levels at? Like, do you weight train? Like, do you get out in the sun? Do you do like these simple things? Cause I feel like those are natural ways to boost your test, that if you're not doing those things, like that should be kind of first, or I don't, but
yeah.
I agree. Like, that's a totally different situation than a 21-year-old that just wants to be jacked and shredded.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, just, eat some more and work out and put your time in. That's my old lady opinion. But anyway, let's bring it back around here, because we're getting close to an hour. This has been like, we can talk forever, but let's kind of talk again about more high level, the woman who's listening, who's 45, who's like, I just do not have the body composition I want, and I feel like I'm trying everything. To recap, we've talked about a couple things. We have talked about, this is unhelpful for the 45-year-old, but it's helpful for the 25-year-old, which is do it right now. Don't wait until you're 40 to take care of yourself. Eat properly, eat enough. Don't stress yourself out. Don't do chronic cardio. Don't kill yourself with workouts 12 days a week. Like, just try to be as, sort of reasonable and balanced and sustainable as you can. Take care of yourself. Don't kill yourself. That's one thing. Stress management. And look, we all have stressful lives. Sometimes you're a caregiver. Sometimes you have a very stressful job. You might work shift work. Like, we're talking about within the context of your life. There are always things you can be doing to help that balance, to bring that cortisol down, relatively speaking, right? Proper weight training, proper nutrition. What are some other things? I think you said, like vitamin D is probably a big one, getting out in the sun. What are some other things that maybe some of these people aren't seeing or thinking about because they're so focused on, am I working out enough? Whatever.
So kind of to go off of like the don't kill yourself portion, like if you are trying to like increase mindful movement, but that's soothing to your adrenals, try adding in more walks instead of like the Pelotons, the HIITs, the Orange Theories. That if that's not working for you, like you need more low impact. And honestly, walking is one of the best fat tools, but also it is the one thing that will just clear my mind. Like if I've had a stressful day, maybe I'll throw on a podcast, maybe I won't. It's not only therapeutic, it's very low impact, but it's great for fat burning. So it's not that you just have to be a couch potato or not do anything. You could just be smart about your movements. If you didn't sleep really good, we didn't even talk about sleep, but that's so important because how many people are waking up multiple times in the night? If you're waking up multiple times in the night to pee, a lot of times that's an adrenal thing. So obviously if you're chugging a bunch of water before bed, well, like ideally, yes, you should not be getting up to pee. And especially if you're getting up between 1 and 3, that's usually your liver. So little tidbits, like we could have a whole nother hour on that.
Talk to me more about that. Not in an hour though. What does that mean? Because I didn't know that. Like if you're, I mean, I understand that if people are stressed out, they're going to be more likely to have like, have these like wake cycles and at night and stuff. But what is the liver and the adrenals and waking up and peeing in the middle of the night thing? How is that connected?
So I almost always see it between 1 and 3, almost always. Like, I'm like, what time do you wake up? And I'm waiting for them to say like 1, 2, 3. Like I'm waiting for it, because I know that that's almost when it is. Because that's when your liver is like really dumping and like detoxifying, is between 1 and 3 in the night. So if that's waking you up, okay, maybe we need to show your liver some love. But again, like your adrenals are kind of dealing with like that water balance. So when your adrenals are and your cortisol is kind of taking over, that water mineral balance can be thrown off. So that's kind of causing, again, you to wake up, which it is somewhat normal to kind of like mini wake up in between your sleep cycles. It should be to the point where you don't even really notice it. And it's not causing you to be awake. It's not causing you to get up and move or, look and stare at the alarm clock. So sleep is just incredibly important. I feel like a good balance is anywhere between 7 to 9 hours. I really don't like any less than 7. I feel like that's a good range, but like some people go to 7 and they're like, if I do 8, it's too much. Or if I do 9, it's too much. Or if I do 7, it's too little. So find what works for you. But like, if you don't get good sleep, your blood sugar that next day can be that of a pre-diabetic. So think about how many people are like compromising their sleep, waking up in the morning to just crush it some more and like hit that 5 a.m. CrossFit class, and they got 6 hours of sleep. And it's like you're burning
they're
your
drinking
candle at both ends.
4 cups of coffee to do it because they're exhausted and stressed out. Yeah.
Yeah. It just like, I think sleep is an incredibly crucial piece. And I feel like, especially in menopause, that if they're having the hot flash, like that is, I feel like, what becomes most compromised in a lot of people, or they're most willing to give that up. Whereas honestly, that is my non-negotiable. I get 7 to 9 hours. If I don't get that, I don't work out. Or I'll find other pockets during the day to move. But like, I'm just not willing to burn my candle at both ends. And if I notice, I am waking up in the middle of the night, are you drinking alcohol, or like, does alcohol make you have hot? Like all these different things can be affecting your sleep, which again, that could be a whole separate podcast.
Yes. Yeah. I'm thinking about a bunch of questions that could be a whole separate podcast, but again, sort of like rapid fire, nutritionally. Now we know that again, different people thrive on different protocols. I think we know that generally speaking, like enough protein is absolutely crucial. Enough fat is absolutely crucial. And carbs to varying extents are going to be important, and probably more important for more women than we've been led to believe recently, right? Like I think there is kind of like a more recent narrative that's like, you don't need carbs and everyone can survive, and you probably shouldn't have carbs unless you're shredded, whatever. Like that's doesn't really apply to a lot of women. I think in generally like some moderate carb intake, that's, something you can digest and that makes you feel good, and timed around workouts, all that stuff. Like that's a whole other thing. However, like, is there some kind of generally accepted information you can give these women who maybe are prone to restricting calories, information around like the importance of fat or carbs, and of course protein, and how to like think about that as they're putting their meals together? Because a lot of these women aren't women who are sitting around eating too much junk food. If anything, they're just not eating enough food, period. So like, what can we tell them to remind them that like this stuff is important for hormonal health?
Yeah. So, I mean, to tie it all back to hormones, I mean, all of those are essential. Like proteins are the building blocks for a lot of hormones. Fats are the building blocks for a lot of hormones. Fat and cholesterol help to make your DHEA. So remember in that pyramid, we talked about DHEA makes all of your sex hormones. I mean, think about all these low fat diets that people go on. I really don't like to see women low fat ever. I mean, I eat what some bodybuilders eat in a day in one meal. I mean, that's not a flex, but like that's just to say like how much, but like how little they're eating. And same with carbohydrates. Carbs, we have kind of come to like demonize them, but carbs are so essential, especially when you're making progesterone after you ovulate. They are incredibly important for making sure that progesterone continues to rise, whether you want to be pregnant or not, because when that progesterone rises, you're getting all the good benefits of progesterone, the skin benefits, the metabolism benefits. I mean, your metabolism can increase pretty significantly in the second phase of your cycle. So if you're craving a little bit more intake, like don't restrict yourself, not saying like go balls to the wall, but like I think that we need to be listening to our bodies a little bit more. And in terms of like how to build your plate, I'd say, aim for like 30 to 50 grams of protein, have, a serving, which I tend to be like a fist maybe of carbs, especially if it's like in and around your workout, seasonal, ones that you can digest, minimally processed that do well with you, digestive, you don't feel crappy. And then in terms of fat, I mean, I always have a good hefty portion of fat, whether it's grass-fed butter, avocados, eggs, beef fat. I tend to lean towards like the animal fats because of how high they are and, potentially vitamin A, all of those essential minerals are just they're easy to digest and they're natural.
Delicious.
They're just naturally occurring and they're delicious.
Yeah.
We do not ever have a shortage of butter in this house because, we go through a lot of it. But I mean, think about it. There's such an increase in satiety because you're not restricting in any form. You're getting so many more minerals and bioavailable vitamins that like you don't need to be surfing your pantry after shoving a bunch of processed low void nutrient foods because you have everything on your plate. So I guess I see that a lot. Like when people are having cravings, like, did you have enough fat in that meal? Did you have enough protein? Are you eating any carbs? Because if you don't have carbs, your body's mineral balance can be off. So like doing carbs that work for you, that could be sweet potato, that could be, fruits, literally anything. Any type of starchy vegetable, grains, if you do like rices and things like that, if you tolerate them, like it looks a little bit different for everybody. We all like and tolerate different things, but don't be afraid of food because if we have not drilled anything in, hopefully it is, please stop overstressing your body because if you do, it's not trying to work against you. It is just trying to help you. Like if you are at a stall, it's not to just keep pushing and pounding harder because it's not, it's a kind of like a check engine light. It's like, please stop before I completely combust. Like I will gain more weight or I will be more inflamed or I will stop with your cycle if you don't stop and listen to me. So they're all check engine lights that I just really encourage people to just listen to those a little bit more.
I love that. I think that's a great wrap up. It's the idea of just like, stop fighting so hard. We're taught because in the fitness industry tells you it's like no rest days and sleep when you're dead and like grind harder and sweat is just you. Blah, blah,
it could not
blah,
be
like,
worse for your hormones.
Yeah. It
could not be worse.
Just treat your body the way you treat someone else you love, like support it and like love it and give it a break and be nice to it. And like, I was just saying in a like recent podcast with Rachel and I'm like, one of my 2023 goals is just to like incorporate more chill vibes into my life at all times because I am a high strung person. I can relate to a lot of these people because I'm like that. I feel like I'm getting better with age and motherhood and all of these things. I'm like definitely less hardcore and I've learned my lessons, but my personality is just high strung. So like, I'm looking at I think it's like your salt lamp back there. I'm like, turn on a salt lamp, like turn on like a non-toxic candle, like put on some chill music, turn the lights down a little bit, like just wherever you can. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It doesn't have to be an hour of meditation every night. It's just like, if you're sitting in your office, like do something that just brings it down a little, or like when you're making your food, like just chill vibes, guys. It little things add up.
Little things. Because that's what can make it sustainable. It's not like this huge project. It's like, oh, I'm going to do a little bit of breath work before I eat this meal. Or, you know what, let me turn down some of this harsh artificial lighting and just like make it comfy, cozy, like put on like a little bit of self-care goes a long way.
Absolutely. And we deserve it. So treat yourself.
We do deserve it.
All right, yes. Halie, I appreciate you. You're going to have to come on again because we kind of scratched the surface, but I think this is I think that, and I mean, people can work with you if they want some more in-depth information, but I think that this is the kind of message, the podcast, that I hope the people who are asking me these questions listen and they just really hear it. They really hear it and just say, you know what, this makes me a little uncomfortable. If you need to hear it again. Yeah, listen to as many times as you need to. Maybe it makes you uncomfortable. Maybe you think that sounds woo-woo and stupid, but maybe just try it anyway. Just try it, and you might be surprised at what you get. So where can folks go if they want to maybe work with you, if they want to learn some more? Where can they go?
So I'm most active on Instagram at Dr. Halie Schoff. And then I have a podcast, Alpha Health and Wellness Radio, that you were on. Tons of episodes there on like hormone health, really diving into a lot of this stuff. And then my website, drhalieschoff.com, if you want to kind of see what we're all about. And by we're, I mean me, because I'm the only person on
One
my
woman
team. I don't know
show.
why I said we're. Me and my dog, who's my logo.
Love it.
You can see what we're about. But yeah, so I mean, I love what I do, and I love opportunities like this where, I mean, again, like we gave you hopefully so much tangible things that you can kind of start really putting into your lifestyle and seeing how it works. I mean, and it's going to take more than just listening to the podcast. You have to obviously implement it, which is work. But I can tell you from firsthand and, you know, with people that I work with, I mean, this stuff is so important.
It works. It works. All right, Halie, thank you so much for your time, and Happy New Year. And we'll do it again sometime.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thanks for having me.